Hours later, Deicide was ready to unleash havoc upon the district of Privy. Rebels from there had aided the resistance in the Altura attack. The abyss had wound her dark innards as tightly as she could compact them. At the moment, he was ignoring emergency transmissions routed through his amanuensis. He was waiting for the small entourage he had ordered to arrive. He had been notified earlier that they had captured a high-ranking leader in one of the resistance groups. Deicide wanted the chance to punish the man himself, but the pair of weavers, Two-Spine and Solemn, had insisted that he simply speak to the man first. As Deicide heaved a sigh and turned in the other direction, he saw a group of risk-eaters headed toward him. "Well, how is it?" Deicide said, opening his arms to Rodella, but she never entered his grasp. "It's all right, I guess," Rodella said. Deicide was hurt by her coldness, and knew everyone else had noticed. Hash spoke up to ease the awkwardness. "You sure you want to do this, sir? We could just bring him to you," Hash said. "No, let's move," Deicide said, as they turned toward a smaller set of apartheid gates for personnel on foot. This would enable them to warp directly to any risk-eater station. As they made their way through each gate, Deicide moved closer and closer to Rodella. "What's wrong?" Deicide said. The abyss aped his empathy. "Nothing," Rodella said, folding her arms. "I know it's not exactly what you expected it to be," Deicide said. Deicide shifted even closer to the woman, inside, wrapping his arms around her. Everyone else tried to ignore the pair, but they were sure to be rumors after the showing. Deicide kissed the top of her head and rubbed her shoulders. "Can we talk later?" she said. "Sure," Deicide said. Then they all strolled into the receiving area of the Risk-Eater precinct. He stopped short of entering when he saw the state of the place. TRS cans were spilling their contents all over the checkered tile floor, their mechanisms clogged, hindering it from completing their work. Deicide had no guess as to when the filters for the ventilation covers had been cleaned. It was as if the entire building had been abandoned for years. He expected a leather-skinned squatter to emerge from behind a desk at any moment and ask him for spare change. "Be damned. Couldn't someone have thrown some of this in some filing cabinets?" Deicide said. "It was probably last shift, sir," Hash said, scratching his scruffy chin. His collar was unbuttoned and his uniform wrinkled. Deicide sighed and thought of how useless some of his soldiers actually were outside of a battle situation or a bar fight. "Oh, please, Hash. Retirement's a little far off to be thinking like a short-timer," Deicide said, shaking his head. "This is deplorable. Little will help if Shay finds you all working in this sty," Deicide said. He was shown into the interrogation rooms below and found two young risk-eaters guarding a door at the end of a long, dark hallway. Two weavers emerged when he knocked on the door. It was Two-Spine and Solemn, the shrewd pair that had dived into the secrets of the district after Deicide and his entourage had been attacked. Deicide placed a hand on each of their shoulders, his normally dejected pout stretched into a grin of a wolf guard. "So," Deicide said. "He refuses to speak to anyone," Solemn said. Two-Spine pointed a thumb at the door. "Some gamey meat in there. Even Soul couldn't make him talk," Two-Spine said. "He doesn't have any cybernetic parts, but still, watch yourself, sir," Solemn said. Deicide nodded to both of them, and then strode into the room. A single light hung from the overhead, illuminating the cramped, gray room. There was an aluminum desk welded to the floor, and a prisoner was shackled to his seat on the other side of it. He wore the pea-green coveralls of an inmate, and his regal-looking face had been brutally beaten. Had Solemn been given enough time, she could have cracked the man before she had reached the end of her protocol sheet. But Deicide had demanded to see the prisoner. Deicide plopped down in one of the empty chairs, leaning back with his hands in his lap, smug grin pulling at the corners of his mouth. His chair squeaked as he pulled it closer to the table and folded his hands underneath his chin. "Well, speak, man," Deicide said. "Only if you're ready to listen," he said. "What the? Do you know who I am?" Deicide said, thumbing to himself. The abyss spread herself throughout the room so that she could listen for inflection and inconsistency. "A man who has been entrusted with countless lives," he said. "That's new for a rebel. I see you wear the garnet rag." You're part of the Apocrypha. I am, he said. You all have risen to the top of my list. Starting today, soldiers are ordered to kill all Apocrypha on sight, preferably in public, Deicide said. Yet I still breathe your air, he said. We want to extract as much information from you as possible, Deicide said. That is only partly true, he said. What? The bedraggled man chuckled. I live only because there is something you wish to know. Deicide crinkled his brow and smiled while leaning back in the chair. But the eyes of the rebel leader never left his own. As the two stared at each other from across the table, Deicide noticed just how disheveled the man actually was. His beard was dirty and patchy. There were fresh bruises on the corners of his face, and blood in one of his eyes. Yet he still retained an air of a gentleman, even a lord. A moment later, the smile on Deicide's face had vanished. He brushed his fingers across the aluminum table and lowered his chin as if to protect his throat. Our shepherd shall guide us out from under this veil of ignorance. No longer shall our fates be determined by superstition and invisible gods. It is you who shall lead the way, God-eater, the man said. What is this nonsense? Deicide said. We will be led unto a new existence by way of our Lord, a man of flesh and blood, forged into the image of a true God, by his own yearning and desire. You were the son of a man such as this, but he lost his way, as men tend to do, as you have yourself. But in the new world you will create on the other side. You will be the divine, and finally we can be ruled by rational thought and science, he said. Deicide rose and glared at the bound man. I am no god. I have no such plans, Deicide said. You must complete the circuit before opening the way to paradise, he said. The end will come, through you or through another, short or long. Death is making his way down the path. What if I refuse? If the circuit is left incomplete, Deicide said. But you must. To refuse would mean throwing your beloved ship into ruin, and all the lives that have made this possible would descend into a world of strife. Hell, brought to life by your doing. I'm sure you've seen it. How? How can you know this? Deicide said. His scowl had been transformed into lament and gloom. Sweat began to bleed out of his skin, and his long antennas drooped down on his head. Just know that I do. The Apocrypha look to you, because you are the only man who could truly alter his fate. It is only you who can decide for certain where this road shall end. We, your people, are hopelessly shackled to your decision, he said. Listen, I am no shepherd. I am a man of blood and steel, a war child. Those who refused to kneel before me perished in the fires of my rage. Would you leave the wolf to tend to the sheep? Deicide said. If the wolf has eaten the shepherd, what choice do the sheep have? Redemption awaits your acceptance. True, by your hand were those who rose against you slaughtered, but you spared the children, the weak, the feeble. Why? Truthfully, Deicide did not know why he spared the humans of so many worlds, when he had simply annihilated others on a whim countless times. Perhaps the features they shared allowed him to view them as more than thinking animals, as he did so many other races. When he looked at humans, especially their children, he saw his own pups, the same curve of their cheeks covered in soft, nearly invisible hair. Yes, it had been more about their appearance than genetics with him. If you are my allies, then why do you war with me? Because we must make you see how much we want to live. Do not allow us to perish in the clashing of gods. In time, our descendants will come to understand your choice. Trust me, the internal wars will be savage, but we will survive. Save us, and may you never lament your decision, he said. before finally relaxing in his seat. For some time, Deicide was unable to speak. Thousands of years it took to become this lurid figure known as Deicide. With his army, even just his own strength in the abyss, there existed little he could not take by force. Yet, as happened many times in his life, he realized that it was only a single decision he made that was monumental. Somewhere within this ship, or perhaps on the other side of the Great Divide, there were more complex schemes at work. Even as he rose from his seat, he could not help but think that he was just another machine in the array that propelled the Yolopile forward. "Speak of this to no one," Deicide said. The man nodded, and Deicide fled from the room. His posture was rigid when he came through the door. Two-Spine tried to straighten his collar before Deicide swatted him away. Everyone else on watch was gathered around him. Their eyes seemed to be begging for information. The Abyss murmured and cooed, musing only to Deicide her thoughts on the situation. Even she, a ravenous princess warrior, held back on devouring the man. "The man is a fool," Deicide said, as plainly as he could manage. "He has no information to give, but I want him under surveillance, in case a rescue attempt is made." Deicide tried to mask his apprehensions by flagrantly exhibiting a cheerful manner, but the Abyss divulged the man's inner turmoil with her incessant whispering. He clapped his hands together and demanded for the entire station not on duty to take the day off. He also urged his entourage to join him for lunch. Though the meal was exquisite, Deicide had to fight down every bite.